Okay, I never thought we would be here because a long time ago I had a problem. And so I tried to come up with a solution, and I eventually designed a solution that worked for me. And now, as we've been hinting, it is time for me to launch a brand new product on the Walking and Talking store. I never created this to be a product. This was an idea I had to solve a problem that I had. And it did it so well. I wanted to release it for a while, but it's hard to do this. It's hard to develop a product. It's easier to make one piece. So, the product finally is a bit. It is called a swellam because it is a combination of two different bits, a Pelham and a Swale, and we'll get into this. What's unique about this bit is it's not a different mouthpiece or, I'm not starting a bit company where I'll sell you loose rings and Pelhams and all the different bits. Nope. It is one bit, one design. And what's unique is the shank. The way this shank is designed is unique. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it is the first new shank design since the Mi'kmaq came out in the late 90s. People have come up with different mouthpieces, different mouthpiece materials, but a different shank, that is rare, and this is one. So, I'm so excited to talk to you about how this bit came into being, what it does, what it doesn't do, and how I believe it can help your horse. So, let's talk about the shank design. This is obviously a leather mouthpiece version, leather wrapped over metal. We'll go over all the 6 different versions. But first, most importantly, how does this shank operate differently than any other bit? So let's go back to some history. So I had a problem. I never have a good feeling in a Pelham. I just don't. I know it's a very popular bit that helps a lot of people. A lot of people love it. And there's nothing wrong with a Pelham. I just personally, in my hands, I don't have a good feeling. A Pelham is very good at stabilizing the shoulders, neck, and head of the horse and stabilizing your inputs. So, it kind of has some numbing effect to your hand inputs. And that stability that the Pelham brings to the rider is a great thing. But for me, the stability is at a cost of the horse feeling a bit, they're just kind of there, and they're always on hand. They're not very dynamic. They don't move as much in a Pelham because of that stability. And I don't like that kind of just heavy here and not very moving. I can't turn. I can't be dynamic. A bit that I really do love is a swale. And I know it's not a very common bit and has a slightly different action to a Pelham. And I did talk about a swale in my bit videos. Go look at them if you want. It uses a ram's horn and applies its rotation differently with the effect of the horse. You can make a horse completely light and carrying themselves, which you can't in a Pelham. The problem I had was in a swale, it was great, except almost always, with almost every horse, when you approach a fence, especially when you jump bigger, if you're jumping, 1 meter, it not so much. The last 2 or 3 steps for the fence, I would very likely get a little bit of popping off the bit, where the bit gets too sharp, what the horse feels is too sharp. And as just part of how a swale gets a horse really light is also when a horse approaches a fence, they do like to apply some weight to your hand, and that's not a bad thing. But a swale's designed to make the horse light. So I couldn't use a swale to jump, and I couldn't use a Pelham because I didn't like the Pelham. I wanted something in the middle. I wanted something that had the stability of a Pelham, but the dynamic nature of a swale. The swellam. So what we did is the design combines both bits. So in a swale, you have the loose ring here. You can see we got rid of the loose ring, and it's this curve feature. It just cuts out the back for clearance purposes. So your main rein attaches to this ring, just like that ring on a Pelham. You'll see this ring on a Pelham. You'll see this ring on a Pelham. But this ram's horn is part of a swale. So your main rein, when you pull your main rein, it's exactly like pulling a main rein on a Pelham. When you pull your second rein attached to the ring here, it rotates the swale action here, tightening the chain, and this curve makes it act just like a swale. So your second rein is a swale. So you have the stability of a Pelham, but the dynamics of a swale. So this way, you have the best of both worlds. And again, I designed it for a very specific use I had, but once I rode in the bit, I realized that it wasn't just for that small use case I thought it would be useful for. It is so much more useful for so many different use cases. And that's what brought me to this point where I'm actually releasing it. I have a couple other bits that I've designed that I don't know if I'll release because they have such a finite use case that, I don't know. This bit is for a person that really likes really likes a Pelham, but the Pelham is just a bit too numb. The horse is a bit too heavy, and they want to try something a bit more dynamic that is more safer in being dynamic. Because most of the time, the more dynamic you go, the more likely it is that the bit gets too sharp and the horse might get offended. Your hands might not be accurate enough, but this is a lot safer in its action. So let's go over the 6 different varieties. Okay, so there's 6 different varieties. I'm going to go over all 6. The differences are with the mouthpiece and the length of shank. That's it. First, you have a metal mouthpiece wrapped in leather, and it has a traditional movement of the shanks. Standard, port, simple, 4.5-inch shank. Then, if you need more leverage, same bit. Everything is the same as the last one, except the shank here is longer. Depends on your preference. Then we have this really cool, really beautiful brass and copper mouthpiece bit, and it has the same shank length as the short leather one. You can see the shank is the same length. I tried to have a lot of similarity because then when you want to make a small adjustment, you can. If the bits are so wildly different, then small adjustments are impossible. Then after this bit, there's a non-leather wrapped version, metal mouthpiece, and this has the same shank as the leather here. So it's whether you want the leather or just the metal. Now, before I show the next 2 versions, the first 4 operate normally, where when you pull one shank, both move. The next, and the way my original swellam that I use is designed, is it has the same shank as the other ones, but I'm going to try and do this so you can see it. When you rotate one shank, the other one does not rotate. Where with a traditional one, if I rotate this shank, they both rotate. They are linked. So this is called a swivel swellam. This, because the shanks rotate. It is a ported straight bar, so it is not hinged. This doesn't bend in any way, but it has a swivel action. The 6th version is the swivel, but with a longer shank. So let's talk about this swivel. I got introduced to this many years ago as part of a double bridle, the Weymouth, the Pelham looking bit in a double bridle. I got shown one that swiveled just like this. And when I rode in it, it made the double bridle make so much more sense. It was so much more dynamic. I could turn better it gave me more options with my hands. I can't remember the last time I rode in a bit with a shank that didn't swivel. All of mine I have made swivel because I can turn. It might be different for you. You might have no problems. It's totally fine. But for me, the swivel gives me so many more options with my hands, and I can be so much more dynamic. This swivel is really fascinating. And the problem is it is harder to ride because there's so much more going on. Your hands and your feel have to be, there's just more. Think of like a piano with twice the number of keys. You can do so much more, but there's twice the keys. This is a lot that way. But this swivel is really interesting. So let's briefly talk about what I would use this bit for. So I feel like if you ride your horse in a Pelham and you like the feel, give this a shot, because this might show you something you didn't know you could feel with your horse, because it's an adjustment to the Pelham. It's not like you go from a Pelham, to a loose ring. And you could have sharp loose rings that are really, really sharp. So this is not like a loose ring is a nicer bit than a Pelham. It's not that. This works so much different, but it's also not that different. It's a really weird enigma. And I before this video, I struggled trying to figure out how to explain it. If you like a Pelham, but you feel like just a little bit more dynamics, a little bit lighter feel, try this. It's really interesting. Or if you like a double bridle, try this. Or, I don't know, some people, I know they're rarer, but a Swale. This can be a lot easier to ride and harder to get wrong than a Swale. This is really interesting because the two reins work so much differently that you can really tune it like you can a double bridle, but a lot simpler to ride. Yes, you can absolutely put converters on it, no problem. There's no problem with that. Try riding with two reins, try riding with converters, whatever makes sense to you. These 6 versions are the 6 versions that we started with. Coming down the line will be, vulcanite or bakelite and plastic coming down the line. It was easier to start with metal because the manufacturing process is easier, and also they last longer. Metal bits just last longer. I understand a plastic bit is lighter, it's softer, I get all that. But they also wear out really fast. So I wanted bits that really lasted. I'm proud of this bit because it was kind of by chance. I drew up like 4 or 5 different ways to accomplish a solution to my problem, which we spoke about earlier. And I didn't know which one would work, and this one worked. And I've been using it for years, and I'm sorry I kept this secret. All of my equipment is totally standard. Everyone can get it, except for this bit. And one of the problems why I never thought that I would release this bit is because it's so hard to find someone to make these. The man that made my original Swelham retired, and he basically made custom bits mostly in Western. And so I needed to find someone who would make production and do smaller size production runs, because each one of these 6 models, I'm not going to buy 500 of each right out of the gate, and have a really high level of detail. And I talked to a number of bit manufacturers, and look, it's hard to find someone who's going to do really good detailed work in anything. But in bits, it's definitely the case. But eventually, I got connected to Adam at AJR Sport, and he was so great to work with. I remember our first call, we talked for like an hour and a half just about bits, about how badly made a lot of modern bits are, about, bit theory, about a bunch of stuff. And we just connected immediately. And this release couldn't have happened without him and without his company. they make amazing bits. You know, I probably shouldn't say that because I'm trying to sell my bit, but look, if you're going to buy a bit, they make the best ones that I'm aware of. And, you know, thanks to Adam and thanks to AJR to, bring this about. I hope you guys try it because it has been a seriously important bit for me. It has helped me out so many times. I show in it. I use it as a transition bit to teach me which bit to use after. I use it all the time. It is different, but unlike the Mi'kmaq, it has real lasting power, I believe.